There's an old story about a man who spent 20 years working in a factory, 14-hour days, repetitive motions, his hands calloused, his back bent, but every night, in the small apartment above the bakery, he painted. He painted the things he saw in his mind, the mountains he'd never climbed, the cities he'd never visited, the versions of himself that existed only in these paintings. He was good, really good. His sister knew, his best friend knew. The handful of people who'd seen his work said things like, "This is incredible. You should show this to someone. You should do something with this." And one night, after enough wine and enough encouragement, he agreed. He talked about it out loud. He told them his plan. He was going to quit his job. He was going to apply to galleries. He was going to become a painter. The moment he said it, something shifted. It felt different when it was a secret. It felt alive. But once he said it, once it existed in the world as words, it felt like a promise. It felt real. And reality is terrifying. The next morning, he woke up with a feeling he couldn't name. Doubt, fear. Suddenly, all the reasons he couldn't do it became very clear. He thought about his rent. He thought about his age. He thought about how many people try to become artists and fail. He thought about how naive he'd been the night before. He told himself he was being realistic now, practical, adult. He didn't paint for 3 months after that. When he finally went back to it, something was broken. The magic was gone. The dreams were still there, but they felt different. They felt like fantasies, like things other people did, not things for someone like him. He never quit his job. He never applied to any galleries. He eventually moved on to a different job, a different apartment. He still thinks about painting sometimes. He still tells himself he will one day. But the truth is, the moment he spoke that dream out loud, he started killing it. This isn't a story about a broken man. This is a story about something that happens to almost all of us, and the psychology behind it is more complex than you might think. When you speak a dream, something specific happens in your brain. It's not just about judgment from others. That's the surface explanation. The real mechanism goes much deeper. The moment you verbalize a goal, your brain treats it differently. It categorizes it differently. It stops being a living, evolving possibility and becomes a fixed statement about who you are and what you're going to do. Think about the last time you told someone about something you wanted to do. Remember that feeling? The moment after the words left your mouth? There was a shift. Suddenly, it felt more real, but also heavier, also scarier, also something you had to be accountable for. And accountability kills dreams in a very specific way. Here's the psychology. Your brain has this system called the intention completion mechanism. Basically, when you form an intention, when you decide to do something, your brain creates this tension, this gap between where you are and where you want to be. That tension is what motivates you. It's what drives you to take action. But here's the crucial part. When you tell someone about that intention, when you verbalize it, your brain experiences a partial satisfaction. It's subtle, but it's real. Your brain hears you say, "I'm going to write a book," and it registers that as progress. It registers it as communication. And that partial satisfaction, that feeling of having already done something, by saying something actually reduces your motivation to do the real thing. Studies have shown this. People who publicly announce their goals are significantly less likely to achieve them than people who keep their goals private. But that's just the mechanical part. The real darkness is what happens psychologically after you speak your dream. Once you said it out loud, it becomes subject to judgment. Not just from others, but from yourself. You start to monitor it. You become hyper-aware of whether you're actually doing it. You measure progress. You compare your journey to other people's journeys. You wonder if you're doing it fast enough, well enough, in the right way. And that constant self-monitoring that kills the thing you were trying to create. Because dreams need space to breathe. They need silence. They need darkness. They need to develop away from the eyes of judgment. When you keep a dream private, you get to be imperfect. You get to be messy. You get to try things that don't work without anyone knowing. You get to fail in private. And failure in private is how you learn. Failure in private is how you die. Think about the painter in the story. When he kept his work private, he was free. He could paint something terrible and nobody would know. He could experiment. He could be bad. He could be learning. But the moment he said out loud, "I'm going to be a painter," he was no longer learning. He was performing. He was trying to live up to a statement he'd made, and that's a very different thing. This is why so many people with incredible potential never do anything with it. It's not because they don't have talent. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they spoke their dreams too early. They told the wrong people. They created expectations they couldn't live up to, and then they became trapped in a choice between disappointing others or disappointing themselves. What's really interesting is how different this is from what we're taught. We're taught that goals should be public. We're taught that accountability is helpful. We're taught that speaking things into existence is powerful, and those things can be true, but they're true at a very specific stage of development, not at the beginning, not when the dream is fragile. In the beginning, when a dream is new, when it's just a feeling, just a possibility, just a whisper in your chest, it needs privacy, it needs silence. It needs to be yours alone, because the moment you introduce other people, you introduce their fears, you introduce their doubt, you introduce their opinions, even if they support you, even if they're kind, even if they're trying to help. Their involvement changes the dream. It makes it smaller. It makes it safer. It makes it something that has to make sense to other people, which means it usually has to be something conventional, something they can understand, something they can believe in. And most real dreams, the ones that actually matter, the ones that actually change, you are not conventional. They don't make sense at first. They need time to become something explainable. There's a concept in psychology called social energy. It's the energy you expend when you're around other people. When you speak your dream, you're activating social energy. You're putting your dream into a social context, and that context drains the dream of its power. It transforms it from something internal, something visceral, something that belongs only to you, into something external, something that has to be defended, something that has to be justified. The people who accomplish extraordinary things, and you can verify this if you look at their histories, they don't usually talk about what they're doing until they've already done a significant portion of it. They develop it in silence. They get good at it in private. They have early failures that nobody knows about. And then, once it's developed enough to survive the judgment of others, once it's strong enough to withstand doubt, that's when they introduce it to the world. This is different from simply being secretive. It's not about shame or insecurity. It's about protection. It's about understanding that vulnerable things need to be protected until they're strong enough to withstand the world. But there's another layer to this, and it's darker. When you speak a dream, people start to watch. Not always explicitly, but they do. They want to see if you're actually doing it. They want to see if you're serious. They want to see if you'll succeed or fail. And watching that invisible surveillance changes how you move. You start to care about the story you're telling about yourself. You start to edit your actions based on what people will think. You start to perform your dream rather than live it. And performing is exhausting. Performing is inauthentic. And performing usually ends in failure because you're not actually doing the thing. You're doing the thing while being observed, and those are very different activities. There's also the phenomenon of preemptive disappointment. When you tell someone your dream, they start to have expectations. Maybe they express them, maybe they don't, but they're there, and you feel them, and some way in your mind you start to brace for their disappointment. You start to protect yourself from the pain of failing them. And that protection mechanism actually prevents you from taking the risks necessary to succeed. Real success requires being willing to fail publicly. It requires being willing to be wrong. It requires vulnerability. But when you've already committed publicly, when you've already spoken your dream, when you've already activated people's expectations, you become much less willing to take those risks. You become more conservative. You play it safer. And safe dreams almost never become reality. The silence isn't about shame. It's about power. It's about keeping your dream in a state of pure potential until it's developed enough to withstand reality. It's about protecting the thing you love most until it's strong enough to protect itself. Think about it this way. A seed doesn't announce itself. It sits in the dark. It develops roots in private. It breaks open in silence. And only once it's grown enough to push through the earth, only once it's strong enough to face the sun, does it become visible. We don't celebrate a seed for its potential. We celebrate the tree. But the tree's power comes from the silence and darkness it experienced first. This doesn't mean you should be completely isolated. It doesn't mean you shouldn't get feedback or guidance. It means you should be very selective about who you tell and when you tell them. It means you should develop enough that you can receive feedback without it destroying your belief in yourself. It means you should be far enough along that other people's doubt doesn't become your doubt. The painter in the story made the mistake of speaking too early. He spoke before he was secure in what he was doing. He spoke before he had proof that he was serious. He spoke before he was ready. And once he spoke, he lost the one thing that had been protecting him: silence. What's heartbreaking is that this happens to so many people. You have a dream, you're excited about it. Someone asks you about it, you tell them, they ask questions, they express doubt, or they express enthusiasm, but in a way that makes it feel real and heavy and terrifying. And then you can't go back to not telling them. The dream is public now, and that changes everything. Some people recover from this. They develop a thick skin. They learn to tune out the noise. They keep pushing despite the weight of everyone watching. But most people don't. Most people experience that moment of speaking their dream, feel the shift, and then slowly let it die. The power of silence is that it protects potential. It allows you to be imperfect without judgment. It allows you to try things that might not work. It allows you to fail. And failure is not the enemy of success. Failure is the currency of success. You can't succeed without failing. But you have to be free to fail, and freedom to fail only exists in silence. This doesn't mean never tell anyone. It means be very intentional about who you tell and when. It means develop your dream enough in private that it can survive being told. It means create evidence before you create expectations. It means know the difference between sharing and performing. The difference is this. Sharing is when you tell someone about something you're building, but you're still building it. Performing is when you've announced something and now you're trying to live up to the announcement. One is creation, one is maintenance, and maintenance always feels harder than creation. If you have a dream right now, if there's something you want to do or create or become, the best thing you can do is keep it quiet. Not forever, but long enough. Long enough that you believe in it even when nobody else does. Long enough that you've already started. Long enough that you have momentum. Long enough that the dream belongs to you and nobody else. And once you're ready, once it's developed, once you're actually doing the thing, then you can speak. Then you can invite people in. Then you can be public about it. But at that point, it's no longer vulnerable. It's no longer fragile. It's no longer something that can be killed by doubt. The silence is protection. The silence is power. The silence is where all real things are born. If this resonates, if you're thinking about a dream you've been sitting on, if you're wondering whether you should tell people about it, this might be your sign to stay quiet a little longer. Develop it in silence. Let it grow. Let it become real. Let it become yours in a way that nobody else's doubt can touch. And then, When it's ready, when you're ready, when it's strong enough to withstand the world, that's when you speak. Understanding the psychology behind why we do what we do, the invisible patterns that shape our choices, that's what we explore here at The Forgotten Self. If this video helped you see something about yourself, about your dreams, about the power of silence, subscribe, because we're building a space where we talk about the things nobody else is talking about, the patterns nobody sees, the psychology behind the choices that change your life. Until next time, protect your dreams. Keep them silent. Keep them safe until they're strong enough to survive the world.